No, the true warrior, I think the true warrior and leader finds a way to heal himself or herself and then earns the right to lead others. He doesn't get home because of the rest of the crew. Odysseus gets home because of 6 female characters. This is startling to realize. There is a deep spiritual teaching there. When we fall asleep, according to Rumi and all the Sufis of Buddhism, you fall asleep spiritually, your soul perishes. And so this is a deep teaching, I think, for leadership. Can you stay awake? You left your soul behind in Troy. You left your soul behind in Saigon or Normandy in the war. And it takes time to draw your soul back home again. That's one of the life lessons in my book. Let love pull you home.
Our guest today has spent more than 4 decades in the company of myths. Early in his career, he became a close protege of the mythologist Joseph Campbell, co-writing the award-winning documentary The Hero's Journey, and going on to bring that same mythological lens to Hollywood, teaching myth and the movies at the American Film Institute, and consulting on story and symbolism for studios including Warner Brothers, Pixar, and Lucasfilm. He's also led mythology travel programs to Greece for more than 3 decades. He's the author of more than 40 books, among them the best-selling The Art of the Pilgrimage and The Hero's Journey, Joseph Campbell on his life and work, and has been featured on NPR, CNN International, the BBC, the Smithsonian, and Discovery channels, and for a decade has hosted PBS and Link TV's Global Spirit, described as the world's first internal travel series. In his newest book, The Wisdom of the Odyssey, 24 life lessons from Homer's epic, arrives in the same season as Christopher Nolan's big screen retelling of the story, and makes the case that a nearly 3,000-year-old poem about a warrior's long, broken road home might be one of the most useful leadership texts we have, not for its battles, but for what it says about resilience, humility, and what it costs to truly return. Phil now joins us from his home in San Francisco, and you can follow him online at www.philcousineau.com. It's a genuine pleasure to have him with us. Welcome to the Sacred Art of Leadership, Phil Cousineau. How are you this morning?
Oh, trying to keep my oars in the water.
There's a lot going on.
Oh my goodness.
And it sounds like you're the man for it.
I hope so. I've been working with this material since I was a kid. And of course, I worked 8 years with Joe Campbell. And at one point he said, you've lived this stuff. That's why you can teach it. Because I've been all around the world in dangerous places, war zones, had my own dark night of the soul. You have to have gone through the hero's journey to teach it.
So is it right if we just get into it then? So
absolutely, yeah.
You understand the premise of the podcast is that, we believe that essentially leadership has become a word that's become lost, that it's lost its true meaning, its true essence of what it meant. It's not about influence and power and authority and hierarchy and status. It means something a lot more deeper and meaningful than that. So we were curious, how do you imagine Homer would interpret the sacred art of leadership from when he wrote the Odyssey?
That provokes me, as Campbell used to say. You're about to have a good interview if you've been asked something you've never been asked before. That's straight from Joe Campbell. So we're off to a good lead. Well, first of all, let's just back up a second and explore this notion for just a moment. This is a description of a true writer or an actor. A writer is someone who can't write. You feel the double negative in there?
Yeah.
Can't write. I think a leader is someone who can't lead.
Interesting.
A true leader is looking around and saying everybody's a sheep, and right? Nobody wants to take over. Nobody wants to lead. Homer then would have gotten into a chariot on a horse and only ridden maybe a day's ride to Troy. For the sake of your show and your audience, then my guess is that he goes to the ruins of Troy and something is set on fire in him. And in my experience, dealing with leaders all around the world, in every imaginable case, including war veterans, by the way, there is a moment that sets your heart on fire. And you feel that you've been blessed, maybe by the gods or by DNA, depending on your own mythology. And you want to take over it, but in the best sense, Homer then is set on fire by the ruins of Troy. It used to be called the enchantment of ruins. And ruins have always symbolized a reminder of our mortality. We are only here for so long. And the ruins all around the world are humbling. We are not here. Empires come and go. Leaders come and go. Something was set on fire in the poet known as Homer. I feel then he went to the Peloponnese, which would have been a few hours away by boat. And then he begins to go to the actual sites where the Homeric battles took place, where Odysseus returns home. Again, the wounded warrior, talk about leadership, the wounded, traumatized warrior. Trauma being Greek for wound, by the way. Trauma means wound. And for many leaders, for many warriors, they're walking around with an open wound. They feel victimized right now. And today, especially in America right now, everybody feels entitled. Everybody feels like they've been left behind. The whole culture is traumatized right now. In the Odyssey, what then begins to happen, I think this is what Homer realized when he went from site to site to site to site. The wounded warrior from 10 years of savage warfare finds a way to heal himself. He'll not wait for $1 million to drop in his lap, not wait even for psychotherapy or some religious saving. No, the true warrior, I think the true warrior and leader finds a way to heal himself or herself and then earns the right to lead others. In Italian, the Italians call Odysseus Ulysses, right? Mm-hmm. Ulysses in Latin means healed wound. Isn't that astonishing? The real leader is one who said, I took responsibility for this.
Yes.
I know my company went wrong. My family went wrong. My career went wrong. I am not going to make excuses. And so the scar, which is so important in the book, the young Odysseus is wounded. It heals over slowly. And even in Christopher Nolan's new movie, it's a powerful, powerful scene when the old servant, who was also his servant as a boy,
yes,
sees the scar. And Matt Damon as Odysseus has to say, shh, wait, it's not time for recognition yet. We need a little more time. So in this sense, the last comment to come full circle then, leaders, I believe, in every known field are scarred. And we know them by their scar. FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, had polio. We know him in one way. We know people by their scar because of the way they tell their story about how they transcended their circumstances. And that's what we love about real leaders. They are not blaming other people constantly.
No.
They show their scar.
I was going to say, so the home aspect of this is quite metaphorical almost. It's that journey back to self. Is there a significance to the time frame that it takes Odysseus? The 10 years of battle and then a further 10 years to get home. What do you think that Homer was trying to depict in that length of time that it took to come back to self?
It's supposed to be a 6-week trip if you're paddling from Troy to Ithaca. 6 weeks with good weather. It takes him 10 years. What does that mean? That's what I'm asking again and again in the book. The wisdom is the meaning that you're gleaning. I play with the word, even the sound, the meaning that you're gleaning from every episode. For me, what this signifies is that someone who has been deeply traumatized in war does not make a beeline home. The warriors we can see in every culture around the world, in every battle. If you go straight back from Iran, Afghanistan, Europe during World War II, the Vietnam, you are unrecognizable. No one can talk to you. No one has your experiences. We have, and I've been working with Vietnam veterans who have still not told their story to their wives after 40 or 50 years. So the 10 years, for me, 10 is a number of cycle. You begin and end. You're now in 2. Now you go back. The first stop, remember, is 7 years with Calypso. In Greek, Calypso means hiding or veiled. In psychotherapeutic language, what that means is this deeply traumatized. He's described as deeply guilty and shamed in Christopher Nolan's movie. I wouldn't go that far. The Greeks would not have recognized that at all. You went to war. It was an everyday issue. It wasn't just for those elite warriors. Everybody knew war. This seems to be a modern projection, but I know what Nolan is doing. He's got to compress. So with that trauma, he has to go into, now you can call it hiding because that's what Calypso actually means. But a man I've been working with in Greece at the healing temples, Dr. Edward Tick, calls this incubation. After a profound trauma, a deep, deep wound, you have to go into a kind of egg, incubation, to be reborn again, to heal that wound, to go into a kind of dream reverie. And that's the purpose, literarily or mythologically, for Calypso. She has him literally in her cave. She lives in a cave, but also it's a sexual symbolism, which is quite beautiful. He is in her cave. None of that eroticism is in the Nolan movie. And I think it lacks for that. There's no sense of deep eros with a capital E. And what Homer is telling us, I believe, in my book, this is part of the wisdom. The man needs love if he is going to heal before he gets home again. It's not just intellectual healing. It's not just negotiating with all the other guys, talking to the crew members. So that was a horrible war, and we've been gone a long time. What do you guys miss most about Ithaca or Mycenae? What do you miss? No, the startling thing about the book is that Odysseus does not get home through sheer dint of will, Nietzschean self-will, Arnold Schwarzenegger, muscular willpower. And he doesn't get home because of the rest of the crew. Odysseus gets home because of 6 female characters. This is startling to realize when you pull back and you try to look deeper into the story. The men, his so-called warriors, his best friends, they keep succumbing to temptation. And every time they eat too much and drink too much or fornicate too much, they are killed. They fall asleep and they die. There is a deep spiritual teaching there. When we fall asleep, according to Rumi and all the Sufis of Buddhism, Hinduism, you fall asleep spiritually, your soul perishes. And so this is a deep teaching, I think, for leadership. Can you stay awake? Excuse me. Can you stay awake while the world falls asleep?
You speak about the help and support and guidance of female, necessity for female leadership, female energy, to both for the leader to return to find himself and find his way home, to the leader that was left behind from where he came from. How do you see, in fact, I'm curious about what the role of female leadership was back in those days and how much it might have changed to how it is today.
It's intuitive. This is the symbolic power of Athena. She is his patron during the entire affair. She comes and goes like a dream. The wonderful phrase in Homer is she drifts a mist. She's got a magic wand, a rhabdos. And when she drifts a mist, she can make Odysseus or Telemachus or others in the book, in the poem, younger or older. but remember, she's the goddess of war, which is interesting. That's why she's got the big helmet and she's got a spear generally. But she's also the goddess of wisdom. What she represents is interior female wisdom, a kind that men need to access if they are going to make the complete decision. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So men will have one way to make the decision, but again and again, we are learning. Every culture has to learn this, and then every culture forgets it. We learn if we go through with only testosterone, we are probably going to be brutal and force our way. That's why I'm clenching my fist here. Men will then tend to force their way through in a business meeting, in a relationship, in a marriage. At war, in sports. I played basketball and baseball at pretty high levels, and I know this behavior with men. Athena appears every time in the Iliad and the Odyssey when Odysseus is becoming too muscular, too male-oriented. She comes in, and it's really breathtaking if you follow what's happening. What Homer is doing, I think, makes him the world's first feminist. He is constantly saying, pull back, take a breath. Wait now, what's the larger picture here? This is what will happen if you go blindly into that situation. Or then she warns him and says, look what happens when you fell asleep, Odysseus, when you fell asleep. Remember, the book is divided, the Odyssey, symmetrically. It's quite marvelous. Homer arguably is the world's first filmmaker. He has what Christopher Nolan beautifully describes as time jumps. He jumps back to the past. He jumps to the future. That's beautiful. That's a very Nolan metaphor. All his movies are about time jumps. So in this, we're going back and forth, which is what happens to traumatized people.
Yes.
We are witnessing.
They relive.
They relive. That's what's called ruminating. When someone in deep trauma ruminates, going back and replaying the thing over and over again. And then I think what Homer is portraying is the last vestige of mythological thought, where we're thinking, why did I think that? Where did that emotion, that deep emotion come from? Where did that instinct come in to just jump in and bull my way through this decision? Athena appears to give him a breath to say, go back into your dream. Remember Penelope. Remember why you left home.
Can we just go back a little bit, right? So it's interesting. You said 5 women that lead him. You talked about Athena, but there was also Calypso and Circe, etc. as well. But there's also Penelope, who's at home holding this kingdom. I mean, that's a significant leadership position, that the kingdom doesn't fall to the suitors. Can we talk a little bit about where's Penelope today in the world?
Oh, thank you. I usually wait a bit to get to her because she literally appears fleetingly in the opening of the poem and the movie. And then again at the end, beautifully, gorgeously in the poem. I think again, too fleetingly in Nolan's movie. But think about Penelope. Her name itself refers to weaving. All 6 female characters in the Odyssey are weavers. They all work with thread, which means they are working with soul and spirit. Thread is an ancient motif in cultures all around the world for soul. Even in sign language, with the gestures with the hands, the sign language, the ASL for soul and spirit, is a thread that you pull out of your belly. Threads are what we follow in stories. Threads are there between people in deep relationship. The metaphor is endless, it's boundless. It's called a mythologem in my world of myth, which means it's a mythic image that sparkles. It shines. Why? I think in the long run, Odysseus is so deeply traumatized by war that he almost commits suicide. There is a moment when Odysseus is on the raft that Calypso helps him build, and Poseidon learns he's escaping again, so he throws up one more storm, one more tempest. The raft is blown to splinters, And there's a moment when he's holding on to the last splinter of the rudder. Think about all the symbolism of this. Think about all the times you and I and everybody we've ever worked with almost give up. There's so much despair. I can't hold on to this company, this marriage, this relationship anymore. And then you hold on anyway. I love the anyway with this. What is the anyway in the Odyssey? It's Penelope's love. This is what draws Odysseus back. It's at that moment, and warriors will tell you this. And I've interviewed hundreds of these. I'm going back again to Greece in September. It's that memory of, it could be your mother. It could be a brother. It's usually your lover, whatever sex description this might be. It's the love. That's one of the life lessons in my book. Let love pull you home. This is what Penelope represents. Love, it's not intellectual, for goodness sakes. It's not, well, I'm a leader, so I better get back to Ithaca because my kingdom is falling apart. Love draws him back. And in turn, then, what Homer has done with symmetry that scholars are still at marveling. That's the word for it, marveling about. Because Penelope is every bit the hero, the strategist, the clever character that her husband Odysseus is. Her ruse of weaving the shroud for Laertes, who is the father of Odysseus, so her father-in-law. She has told the 108 suitors, I will marry one of you once I finish the shroud. But we know now at night, she unpicks. That's the beautiful word that Homer used. Unpicks again. So she has to start again in the morning. This strategy is absolutely brilliant because she is picking. She has to pick a suitor. Remember, that's the word they use. Antonyms, again, you have to pick one of us. You have to pick one of us. So at night, she is unpicking, which is beautiful wordplay. It's throughout the book. We've had men up here and women down here, right? Is because when they finally get together at the very end of the book, what happens speaks to, I think, the balance that the two of you guys are groping for, looking for, hoping to find in this conversation, to find in the Odyssey, to embolden you to keep going forward with your own work. After the famous recognition scene, it's so important in the Odyssey because, again, travel was so dangerous, and he's gone for 20 years. So in this world, we know this because of other plays and other stories. There were a lot of imposters. A man who would have come and knocked on the door, hoping for Zeus's law, the law of hospitality, say, come in, we'll feed you, we will bathe you with oil, we will entertain you with music. There were a lot of imposters. So Penelope has to be absolutely sure this is Odysseus, and vice versa. He needs to be sure she has been faithful. They finally recognize each other, which is really the origin of Aristotle's ideas of recognition in all drama ever since. We still get it in 99 out of 100 movies. There is a recognition scene where there's a jolt in the movie or the play. Well, they recognize each other. They go to bed. And this is so beautifully portrayed, just in one or two lines in the different translations. The one I like is Lattimore, in which he said, and they shared their joy of love together. See, joy is there in Homer over and over again. Joy should be there in leadership. There isn't much joy in Nolan's film. He picked a very different tone.
He did.
But again, movies are choices. So here's the payoff. They share their joy of love. And then Penelope, you're asking me about Penelope. She's the great weaver of love. She raised their son all alone. She fought off not one, not two, but 108 suitors who actually want to murder her. They don't want to just get into her bed. They want to murder her. So she turns to Odysseus and she says, come tell me of thine ordeal. My heart can take it. Whatever happened to you out there for the last 20 years, I am strong enough to hear about this now. And like most men, Odysseus kind of shrugs his shoulders a little bit. And he says, oh, well, let me tell you what happened. I was the great leader at Troy. I'm the reason they won the war because of my Trojan horse. He tells a few stories, but here's then is the beauty. And for me, there is a gorgeous metaphor here for all leadership. He has told his story. He really has mythologized himself, which is at the heart of all businesses, by the way. All relationships have an element of self-mythology. This is the way we search for meaning. And Odysseus now, we're halfway through the night. Let's say it's 3 a.m. in the morning. Odysseus turns to her. This takes my breath away. Sorry, guys. It takes still, after all these years of reading this book. He says, oh, and by the way, Penelope, tell me of your ordeals here. It must have been difficult for you to raise our son all alone and for you to take care of my father. And I hear that my mother died of grief for me. So you were alone. How did you deal with 108 suitors? And then, guys, he listens. He listens to her. This is part of leadership that is often forgotten. You tell your story, you mythologize yourself, and then you listen to the other people in the company, on the team, whatever it might be. And as Homer then says, they talked till dawn. This is breathtaking to me. This is a true marriage. It's true leadership. The man and the woman, the male and the female sensibilities. Let's call it the sensibilities. So there's brute strength, but there's also intuition. There is the weaving. It's the metaphor Homer uses again and again. She weaves him. In a sense, she pulls the string to bring him home again.
Phil, can I challenge an assumption that Homer was the original feminist? Because from where I'm seeing it, Penelope was sat at home being completely faithful, waiting for her lover to return. And Odysseus is out having a different experience and has expected his wife to stay faithful while he hasn't. Have I misunderstood that?
But have you ever been at war? No, this is prostitutes followed armies all through history. It was known right up through medieval times that men may never come home again. This was a common temptation. And what Homer is saying, it's not about sex and desire. It's about eros. The women that he does sleep with, Calypso and Circe, are sleeping with him to re-eroticize his life and to bring him back alive. Without that love, he would have perished like most other heroes would have perished. And the Greeks were not afraid of eros like we are. There was no eros. Now, I don't mean eroticism. I don't mean pornography. There was no eros in the new movie version of the Odyssey. It's all over in Homer, but also the playwrights. All of the poets are saying that eros he is the second god after chaos to have come into existence. So according to the Greek philosophers, eros is how we deal with chaos. Chaos is what's born first. There's chaos in every relationship, in every business, in every culture. How do we unravel how do we bring order to chaos? The Greeks were the ones who told us eros, but I mean love in the grander sense. Love of the land, love of the sea, love of family, love of a tradition. That's what brings him home. So no Greek. And we have to remember, Homer is burnishing these stories that came down to him for 500 years. And then he has to fashion such a story that would have made sense to his audiences, palace after palace after palace, in the different the festival competitions, and what they would have wanted to hear and why he was telling the stories this way. People wanted to believe that the husbands, the brothers, the uncles, the grandfathers even were coming home again. And that we could start life all over again. To say that a sailor or a soldier may have slept with somebody on the way home would not have been startling to anybody 3,000 years ago. And if it didn't work when these were retranslated, let's say by Virgil in the Aeneid, and then again in the Middle Ages with Dante and with other movies, if that didn't work, if that didn't make sense to people, that would have dropped away. But what makes sense to people the world over for the last, 3,000 years, we've been telling this story. We need eros. We need love to get home again. It's not just an intellectual or a testosterone-driven idea. Does that make sense? We need love in leadership.
It definitely does. And I think there's a really interesting thread of spirituality throughout the book. And there's this real strong thread between that Derek and I talk about in terms of spirituality and commerce and business, and it all kind of comes together. But I'm gonna the question's quite clunky. You talk about Homer.
Let's be playful with this.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Homer, from his childhood, the stories that he built and he learned and he became enamored with. When I read the book, when I saw the film, and as I look through it, especially your 24 lessons, as it were, that come through each of the parts of the book, there's a real parallel with some of the Vedic texts, particularly Ved Vyasa's the Bhagavad Gita, and the stories and the principles around duty, around ego, around letting go of outcomes, death. All these things. I'm curious, and when you said at the very beginning around travelers' stories passing, do you think at any point there was some ideas that came from that? You talked about the going to India, etc. I'm just this is a completely open question.
Absolutely. And you're the first one to pick up on that.
Wow.
I've had almost 50 interviews already about the book and the film. And if you recall, I hope it seems like you did read the book closely. I do play with the very number of suitors.
The 108
is not arbitrary.
No.
It's not just thrown out there. Coming from your tradition, that it's a magical, mystical number in Hinduism, in Buddhism, but also American Indian mythology, also in Aborigine mythology, also in Christian. There are 108 beads in a rosary. Here in America, there are 108 threads in a baseball. There are 108 steps climbing into most Buddhist Hindu temples. For example, Angkor Wat in Cambodia. Why 108? Because it's a way to divide into, 432 is this magical, mystical number in Vedic cosmology. All these numbers refer to the big turning of an era. A turning of an era. And I think that is what's being signaled in the Odyssey. The Iliad is the last vestige, the last hue and cry of a purely martial mythology. This would have been the old Mycenaean age, which was split asunder by warfare, probably earthquakes. We have all these strange associations of sea people coming from somewhere we don't know. And Nolan actually refers to them a couple times in his book. So the 108 suitors represents to me the end of Odysseus's reign. Something is changing even for him on Ithaca, and something new is coming. So here then, to bring together both of your points, I hope in a playful and beautiful way. Remember, it's Penelope's then strategy to say, or she remembers, and memory and forgetting are huge themes here, which makes it, for me, a very mystical vision. We need to know when to forget. We need to know when to remember. Every time the crew loses memory, or when Odysseus falls asleep 3 times, catastrophe follows when he falls asleep. There's a big message for leaders, really, everywhere. So in the Odyssey, Penelope suddenly remembers. It's very mystical, as if Athena helps her remember that when Odysseus left, he said, if I'm not back by the time our son grows whiskers on his chin, when he grows a beard, you should remarry. Because he's guessing that's 18, 19, 20 years old. That means I didn't make it. I died at Troy, or I died on the way home. So then she begins to think. Now, back in her mind, she still believes Odysseus is alive. That's the beauty of the faithfulness, the devotion. She's fiery. It's not sentimental in any way whatsoever. She is a fiery, strong woman. But now she has to come up with a ruse, a strategy. And she comes up with the bow test, which is deeply, forgive me, if we want, we can pass earwax like Odysseus did to his crew when they went by the sirens, to any of your listeners who don't want to hear this. But I think the whole business about shooting the arrow through the 12 axes is deeply sexual. It's in the book and in the movie. Anne Hathaway really reads these lines beautifully. Apparently, she was inspired by Maria Callas and her performance in Medea.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that a beautiful thing? One of the great performances by an opera singer ever in the movies. And Anne Hathaway says, I wanted to recapture that fire. So when she says, if you want me, to the suitors, 108 of you, you have to be every bit the man my husband was. So this is not a sentimental woman at all. She is strong. But she's also saying you have to be able to pull the bow back. You have to be strong enough to do that.
To string it, yeah.
And now we know what's happening. Nobody is as strong as Odysseus. Nobody could do what he does with her. So Campbell, in a lecture he gave for us when we were filming The Hero's Journey back in the mid-1980s, he once thought that the 12 axes, so it's an axe, which is an echo of the Minoan axe from Kenosis, but there's got a big circle on it so they can hang the axe on the walls of the palace. He thought it was a reference to the zodiac, the 12 constellations of the zodiac. So all of these these are mythological images. They're saying Odysseus and Greece itself have made one big turn in the universe. Talk about, let's say, cosmology from your tradition, the Hindu Buddhist tradition. We have gone through one rotation and something new now is coming. There's a profound change that is coming in the universe. All of this is signaled in the book. And why would he have layered all this in? One idea that I play with, again, in my book about the wisdom, is that he is the last, or the poet known as Homer, is the last of the traveling bards as we would know it. You think of someone like a Bruce Springsteen going on concert and he plays 300 gigs around the world, right? Mm-hmm. And then maybe he announces his retirement, or Pete Townsend in The Who announces his retirement. And I'll pay $20,000 to go see The Who one more time. I'm thinking he's the last of the kind of rhapsode. That's where we get the word rhapsody. They're the one who sings the stories of the ancient ones. But he's singing a story about the end and the end of a world. A kind of a curtain is coming down on the old Bronze Age. We need new forms of leadership. That's where this story is so rich for you, your listeners. It's the end of one form of leadership, and it's crying out for another one.
As the world, it does. As the world is so much now, right? In terms of there is this absence of leadership, this void of leadership that exists out there today.
And I think it's partly why so many women are now coming in to this material, which seems so overtly masculine, and they are re-energizing it. You think of Madeline Miller with her book on Circe, or Carolyn Alexander with her book on Achilles, and of course now Emily Wilson and Margaret Atwood with the Odyssey. What they're saying is they recognize the deep female powers, the intuitive powers that have been in these characters all along. But frankly, between you and me and the flagpole, right, they have been suppressed by deeply sexist male scholars over the years who did things like, it's a very specific, easy example. Helen is one of the most magical, healing characters in all of world literature, but she was called a whore for centuries by male scholars. Now, suddenly, you've got people like Emily Wilson and others going back and saying, no. The Greeks never used that word. They called her complicated. They called her a healer, a sorceress. What they were talking about was the deeply confusing but life-informing power of beauty itself. And then in the movie, for reasons I still don't understand, it's not the issue of casting Helen as an African-American woman. It's having her scarred. Spoiler alert. When she turns at the banquet table in Sparta to young Telemachus, who is desperate for news about his father, she turns and she's not beautiful. She's scarred. And what Nolan is saying is when she got home, Menelaus probably took a knife to her and scarred her and said, this is what you get for going away and starting the Trojan War. But that's nowhere in Homer. What's so powerful about the imagery, the dialogue, half of the Odyssey is in dialogue. Think about that. 50%. It's tell me a story and then someone else listening, which is the art of leadership. Knowing when to tell your story, knowing when to listen.
The concept, it's what Homer wrote was a deeply spiritual text, right? It's returning back to soul. It's returning back to self. It's the hero's journey. It's the journey of man, woman, child, doesn't matter. It's that journey back to self. And that seems to have got lost over time. And it's been mixed in with all these other kind of myths and stories, etc. Your book seems to be going back to, or at least alluding back to that very deeply more spiritual meaning.
Well, yeah, thank you for that. And let me just pick up quickly on the other part of the question you asked me before, which I didn't quite get to. There is this tradition. You hear the story, maybe you read it in our time, you visit the place, and then you begin to embroider, reinterpret, like Albert Camus said, you have to breathe a new life every generation into these stories, or they die. They die in the vine. And part of the tradition was that in all these travels, Homer going to the sites mentioned in all the stories he heard about the Iliad and the Odyssey, at the time when the first Indian traders were coming across the Silk Road to Istanbul, and then some of them going all the way to Greece as merchants, as traders, but also as storytellers, as doctors. You know this ancient tradition that the ancient Vedic healers would give you herbs and a story. It wasn't just medicine. The Vedic healers, in my understanding of this, from people like Deepak Chopra, who I know I interviewed in my own show here on PBS, they said our doctors always gave a story from one of the old myths, the Mahabharata or something, because they felt that the healing herb was one thing, the story was another way to heal. If you know this background and you begin to read, especially the Odyssey, not so much the Iliad and the Odyssey, you realize there is another form of wisdom. There's another voltage coming in here that's not just Greek. It's coming from somewhere else. Probably what I like to think is the storyteller in the Homer that we know, a poet known as Homer, would have been going to the equivalent of taverns, going to the seaports, sitting there, greeting sailors as they come and go, the merchants as they come and go. And where are you from? The beautiful islands. And what beautiful tradition are you from? Isn't that a great greeting from the ancient Greeks? In that Homer, as we know, would have heard a different way of thinking that I think came in to Greece. And later, this was Joe Campbell told me this too. There was a place on the Silk Road called the White Horse Monastery. Do you know of this?
I don't know.
Halfway between Istanbul and India, in which the Greek traders and the Indian traders met and they gave each other manuscripts. And it was the giving back of Greek knowledge, Greek philosophy to the Indians and vice versa. And that is one of the theories about what sparked the Greek miracle and later the Indian miracle. It's not just the indigenous thought coming up. It's this sudden, almost like ideas from another world, another universe. This, if you know how to read Homer, there is something brand new and beautiful and Eastern coming into his thought.
And this is fascinating because we were just chatting about this in the research before you were coming on, Phil. We were talking about even, the parallels with Christianity and Jesus and whether, and spirituality, and whether that, what became religious leaders were actually spiritually awakened individuals that had got new information from a melting pot of new
Stories.
ideas.
Yeah.
So stories.
There it is.
So
beautiful. Thank you for that.
So you're in your location there could have been the spot when those religions combined.
Wow. Right. So in this way, this is why you'll see if your readers listen in the book, I'm playing with this idea that Odysseus is not just lost. He was considered to be a great leader, a general, a navigator, and so on. He's a lost soul, which is very different from being situationally lost at sea. The Mediterranean isn't that big, right? But he was a lost soul, as anybody who's deeply traumatized is. And people who are in trauma need time. So here's something. In ancient times, the Greek government, at least in those, what we call the classical period, paid for returning soldiers. There's that word again, return. The Odyssey was probably called the Return, not the Odyssey that we call it. It was the Return. Paid for the returning soldiers to go to one of 300 healing sanctuaries all around ancient Greece. Epidaurus is still there. It's the most famous of all of them. But in ancient times, there were 300 of them. And the government would pay for you to go there if you were injured in war, if you were injured, let's say, with a plague, disease that was rampant. And you would go and spend a few days or a week or 2 weeks watching plays, watching drama, because it was believed that witnessing a play was a way for you to deeply identify with the story that could heal you. You were given herbs. You were given time with a dream doctor. So you slept in the Asclepion, the dream temple, and the next morning, there would be a dream doctor, a kind of an early Dr. Jung, who would say, well, the eagles circling over you mean such and such.
Mm-hmm.
What this suggests for me is that the ancient Greeks realized that you were lost after war. Or you might refine that a little bit. You left your soul behind in Troy. You left your soul behind in Saigon or Normandy in the war. And it takes time to draw your soul back home again. That's why it took 10 years, 7 years with Calypso, just healing, learning to tell his story again. And then with Circe for another year. And again, this is kind of lost in the Nolan rendition of the film. It's quite extraordinary. But Samantha Morton playing Circe, shaping, she says, well, your men came to me and they were pigs, so I turned them into pigs. They deserved it. But what's missing is that she was a healer with herbs, and she knew the constellations. She knew the sky. She said, I will save your men. I will turn them back into men if you stay with me for 1 year. So he does. And this is another way he learns again the beauty of nature. He learns the sea through her. She tells him exactly how to go home. And then one thing, I don't know how this would be applicable for you in your work in leadership, but for me, it's very big. Let's say my work with Campbell, you have to go down into the underworld or you never get home again. It's in the underworld. It's in the labyrinth where the gold is. All that symbolism, the dragon hoarding the gold, the sword in the stone, everything is there. You have to know how to go into darkness. So Circe tells him, you will get home again, but you are still a bit inflated, Odysseus. You still think too much of yourself. So remember what she tells him. You've got to go into the halls of Hades. You have to talk to Tiresias, who is a seer, which means seer, someone who can see into the future. And it's there that most scholars, they don't agree on much, guys, but they agree on this one point. The entire Axis Mundi, the turning point of the Odyssey, is when Odysseus goes into the underworld and he confronts the shadow of his mother, who died of grief, but then Achilles. And here's the killer here. For me, this is deeply, deeply appropriate for our time. Suddenly, like some of us do when we meet stars or celebrities or famous people, suddenly we become 12 years old again, right? So Odysseus sees the shadow, the shade that beautiful word, the shade of Achilles. And he just starts talking volubly. And he says, Achilles, you won't believe it. You know, it was worth it for you to die young. It was worth it. Like your mother said, you could either live long and no one would remember you, or you could die young, maybe 22, and they will tell your story forever. Achilles, that's what's happening. We are still telling your story. The way you pursued, the word is Kleos, Kleos, fame and glory. It worked. People will tell your story forever. And Achilles looks at him, and now I'm paraphrasing, but he says, you idiot, which, by the way, is an old Greek word which refers to people who don't vote. Seriously. Idios is people who are not involved in public affairs.
Very
Think about that. So he essentially calls Odysseus an idiot. You fell for that crap? You fell for the glamour of war? And then in this beautiful lines, translated in so many different ways, so I would give up all of that fame and glory. I would give up what you're telling me, how people are now singing about me. I would give up all of that for one more day of sunshine. And at that point, I think what Homer is giving us is what all great poets, even let's say right up to that famous book by Viktor Frankl, and the meaning of life, which he found when he was incarcerated for 4 years in Auschwitz. In the end, what do you glean out of all this? All the adventures, the glory and the agony of life. You are able to choose life over death. Deep life, and I'm saying love in my book, over fame and glory. I'm calling from California now, or you calling me in California.
Yeah.
And I'm in a culture that chooses fame and glory over love and life every minute of every day of every year. Fame and glory, money, riches, success, which has made us the most innovative people in human history. Also the loneliest people in human history. No one talks to each other anymore. It's all about how many hits you get on the internet, how many people are watching you.
How many subscribers to your podcast? It feels like we've known this for 3,000 years at least, all these lessons. You know, it's brilliant that we're now bringing them, resurfacing them, reinterpreting them. But how come we've not been able to apply these lessons, you know, and improve on them? What's gone wrong with society over the last 3,000 years that we're in that place where a lot of leadership is about ego rather than about helping people?
And patriarchy and winning and ego and celebrity. And
I was wearing an Odyssey sweatshirt in a cafe here in San Francisco just a couple of days ago. And the guy came up to me and he said, congratulations on your book. People are talking about it. I want to shake your hand because I remember reading the Odyssey in high school 40 years ago. And then I'm getting a shiver thinking about this because his eyes got misty. And he said, and I loved it because I recognized myself in it. Good grief. Is that a beautiful thing? What is it that you recognize? We're all on a journey, but not just any journey. The Odyssey, as I define it anyway, is the journey that changes everything. Changes your view of the world, the view of yourself. And that's why, coming back on your question, why we learn it every generation and then we forget it again.
It's the journey itself, isn't it?
This is one of the great teachings that Houston Smith taught me and others. All deep spiritual teaching is about waking up. I think those were the last words of the Buddha. They were asking the students to equalize, what's your final, tell us one more thing on your deathbed now. Compress all of your learning. Wake up. Wake up. I think it's a hallmark of all art. And the Odyssey is a book about waking up again because so many characters fall asleep and immediately when they fall asleep, catastrophe happens. Monsters appear. Think about the implications of that. We get lazy with our friendships.
We get comfortable.
We get lazy with our leadership beliefs. Oh, this is what I learned in business school back there at the University of Pennsylvania in 1970. Oops, forgot that. Right? So the Odyssey is that kind of book we go to, I think, every generation. And then, oh my, how did I forget that? How did I forget that? And I saw it in Super IMAX here in San Francisco. There were 1,000 people in the audience. And for a lot of the passages, you could hear the proverbial pin drop. And there were people of every race, every creed, men and women alike, split right down the middle, because we were watching our story being played out in front of us. And now, of course, there are nuances and turns and twists, but the great, great movies cast a spell. We learn, you remember the famous couplet in T.S. Eliot? Where is the knowledge lost in information? Where is the wisdom lost in knowledge? That's why I wrote the book. You asked me an hour ago or so what inspired me to write this. I have a lot of this information, obviously, at my fingertips. I have a lot of the knowledge. I've read every known translation. I go to these sites. I take people to these sites, including Greeks, by the way. So I'm trying to glean. I'm trying to pull out the wisdom that means something to us now. Now. And I remember talking to Joe about this, and he got really reflective, and he said, this was his phrase, exactly. That got into me, Phil. The idea of going deeper, one more layer into these stories like the Odyssey, and saying, what does it mean now? What can I learn about leadership, friendship, or the equality between men and women together? What does it mean now? That's what I hope to God I did that with this book.
And the role of love, right? The role that love plays, that sense of unity and that companion togetherness, all that kind of stuff that comes in. As what we love to do in terms of closing our episodes is to kind of give you the opportunity to either share a motto, a phrase, a mantra, or a line from mythology. I'm sure you have many that you keep coming back to, that means something very deeply to you for your own life. Would you mind sharing with us?
What a wonderful invocation. Thank you. That's very ritualistic, the way that the two of you just did that. And it's ceremonial, what you just did. So I will happily step into the ceremony and say, yes, the line that feeds me again and again and again that I learned at the University of Detroit, where I grew up studying writing. Albert Camus, in one of his late essays, said, and this is close to a direct quote, an artist's task is no more than to go back in time, back into imagination, and to retrieve the one or two images that first moved your soul. Then he goes on to say, if you have a discipline to know how to go back in your imagination to a childhood moment, maybe a moment in your youth when you found a mentor, the mentor who helped steer you in your direction, you find those one or two images, you will never be paralyzed again. You will never stall. You will know what your purpose is. But people forget. Or sometimes we sentimentalize childhood, or someone will say, well, grow up. What does that mean, that you wanted to be an astronaut when you were a kid, or you wanted to be a poet? No. Creative people, deep, deep leaders know those 1, 2, or 3 moments. One, maybe even for your listeners especially, is an exercise I do in my writing classes, which I've done all around the world. I have writers' retreats in Paris, Dublin, Greece. I'll ask especially people who are stuck. And who isn't stuck, right? In a relationship, in your vocation, in your life. I'll say, we're going to spend the next half hour by going back in our imagination, like Monsieur Camus told us to do. And I want you to retrieve the image of the first person in your life who, not your parents, the first person other than your parents who deeply recognized you. That's your mentor or your muse, the one who said, you have a way with words. Oh, you have a wonderful way with music. Or I like the way you have a set shot with the basketball. The first person who looked into your eyes and said, you're special. You have a gift. You have a spark. You know what? In my teaching, 40 years of teaching or so, I have never had anybody in a class, thousands of people, who didn't immediately know that moment. You go back and you say, oh my God, that was my music teacher, or that was my running teacher, that was my running coach, or that was a friend that I met at Oktoberfest in the 10th night of getting drunk in Munich, whatever it might be. We remember that moment when someone looks right at us and says, oh, boy, you're different, which means you have a soul. You have a spirit.
So would it be too personal to ask you to share your first image?
It's, thank you. And again, it even chokes me up a little bit. I was in high school here in Detroit, and my parents were splitting up, and that was rare in the late 60s. French Catholics did not divorce. It was traumatic for my parents, for everybody around us. And then I looked around and I realized a few of my running mates and my basketball mates were also going through broken marriages. Fortunately, we had a track coach, Mr. Natkowski. See, I get even choked up about this now, who began every year when we were running for him with this classic line. It was right out of Homer, and I don't know if he even knew it, but he said, I am here, first days of practice, I am here to teach you guys how to run, how to carry a football, how to shoot a basketball. Oh, that's true. I'm really here to help you become men. Proud men that your families would be proud of. You see, can you feel the fierceness in my voice there?
Can.
I'm giving you what he gave us. And you know what that means? He looked all around the gymnasium and he made eye contact with every one of us. I have never forgotten that moment. And I wrote about that in my book, The Olympic Odyssey, the origin of our infatuation with sports. And I talked about how he helped me get through my dark night of the soul by recognizing that I was different as a runner and a ball player, but also as a philosopher. He was always saying, Cousineau, have you found yourself yet? Cousineau, are you still looking for yourself? Cousineau, hey, you're a great runner, but have you found yourself? You seem a little lost. Have you found yourself? So I named him, and I told that story in my book about the Olympics to talk about the function of mentors in sports, in athletics, in drama, in teaching, in business. And later I had a book signing in Detroit and I invited him. He was still around,
Wow.
late 70s or so. He came to the event, tough guy, all-American tackle in American football. Mm-hmm. He came and he was crying.
Wonderful.
And he couldn't even talk. He couldn't even talk to me because I had described him and his real function as a coach. I named it the way that he had named my situation.
Yeah.
Then his wife, he couldn't even talk. My tough coach could not even talk. His wife took me aside and said, Leonard loves your book so much and he is so proud of being in the book. But he's a little mad at you now because everybody calls him Mr. Mentor. And he says he's secretly proud of that. So what am I saying? Coming full circle, in the Odyssey, when Odysseus goes off to war, he knows he may never come home again. So he turns to his best friend, the family counselor, whose name is Mentor. In Greek, this means mind maker. The mentor is not a teacher. The mentor is certainly not a guru. The mentor is the one who says, what do you think? I am here to help you shape your soul. I am here to help you find the courage of your convictions. And that was Mr. Natkowski to me. Every time I teach, guys, all around the world, I think about Mr. Nat. And I think about that moment of, I've got souls and spirits I'm trying to shape here in the best, most compassionate way. But I don't see them as students or numbers. I see them as souls and spirits.
And that is leadership.
Yeah, that's leadership, and we all have that, right? And that sense of waking up, that sense of journeying, that sense of coming home is allowing ourselves to see that within ourselves.
Everyone has it. But everyone, again, not everyone, but many, many people instead choose the path, not the career, the path of money, glory, outward success. And what we're talking about in this language is the inner world. It's the inside story. Maybe I'll close with this. You know, Robert Johnson his mentor was Carl Jung, a great friend of mine. We lectured together many times. He wrote these great books on the mysteries of romantic love. He, she, and we, if you remember those books. Great, great teacher. And we were lecturing together on the King Arthur legends. And during the intermission, we were signing books. And a little boy, 6 years old, came up to Dr. Johnson with his mother and father. And he said, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Johnson, I know what a myth is. Now, this is a moment for a great teacher. You can just say, oh, no, I'm too famous to talk to a kid and brush the kid away or sign more autographs. But instead, he knelt down on one knee to be at an even level with the boy. That's elegant. That's real elegance. And he says, tell me, Johnny, you have a secret, right? You know what a myth is. And the boy looked recognized. That's that moment of recognition again. That's at the heart of mentorship. That's what I am trying to teach people in all my books and my writings. The young boy turns to us and says, a myth is a lie on the outside and a truth on the inside. I mean, that's worth a PhD. Think about the myth of Circe, the myth of Calypso, the myth of King Arthur, the myth of the Aborigine quest into the outback, the Native American myths. They're fantastic in the old sense, fantastic imagery on the outside. On the inside, there are truths we can still live by.
Beautiful. Honestly, yeah. What a great way to close the show. Thank you, Phil, for giving us so generously of your time, your wisdom, your stories. You're a natural orator and storyteller yourself. We hope you've enjoyed being on the podcast with us, because we've certainly enjoyed having you on.
More than enjoy. I rarely get a chance to talk at this level. Your questions, your concerns are probing. They're honest. They're challenging in the best way of challenging. And I think it's timely what you're doing. You're helping all of us reevaluate what it means to be a leader in a relationship, in a business, on our own spiritual quest. You're encouraging us to reevaluate what that means.
Yes,
that's timely,
thank you.
Or timeless.
Thank you, Phil. That means a lot coming from you. It really does. And if you've enjoyed this episode, like, subscribe, follow, share, do all the good things you need to do on all the social platforms. And more interestingly, let us know if there's someone out there that you think we should be having a conversation with. We'd love to get people that you want on the show. See you next time.